Okay. So, good evening. My name is Eksteen and I'll be hosting this tonight with you guys. And I'm really looking forward to also hear your comments and your feedback. So, if you have any questions, please just put it in the chat box, and then in the chat box we'll see what your questions are, and we'll respond to them the moment there's a break. There'll also be some questions I'll be asking during the presentation, and please also answer them in the chat box for me, please. And if we can start that presentation.
Okay. One second. Come on.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Okay, and chats, where will they appear?
You will not be able to read the chat at the same time. We'll have to move it.
Okay, so the first thing we're talking about is, do we connect, or are we connecting dots? Now, it's sort of the theme for the evening and a theme for the series of webinars. At the moment, I've got 4 of them worked out. We'll discuss with Yara and to see what time scale you guys would like to have this in. We'll take it from there. So anyway, here's the content for tonight. So we're starting off with mentoring versus coaching, just get an idea what that is. Then I've got something called the growth formula, which basically looks at what are the things that helps to grow. And then we're looking at the differences between motivation and behavior and how those two influence each other. And then we'll be looking at what it is to receive feedback. Now, what you guys might have heard a lot of before, might have had training on it even, is how to give feedback. I take a slightly different approach. It's one that was developed at Harvard in the US. 2 friends of mine there wrote the book on receiving feedback. And that is sort of my approach as well. I think it's important that we can steer the conversation as mentees. I think mentees are in the driving seat as well when it comes to a mentor relationship. So mentees need to understand how to receive feedback and get something out of it. Right. So that will be the focus. So for the next sessions as well, we'll look at feedback and the things that get in the way of feedback and receiving feedback. We'll look at different types of feedback. And then we'll look at how do I work through this resistance, and how do I get going with my mentorship relationship, and how do I make sure that we connect well with each other. So this is tonight, the first webinar. And I've heard that this is the first time you guys are organizing a webinar. Is that correct? So yeah, it's a new system for me as well. So we're all new to this. So if you have any questions at any time, or any suggestions, or any improvements that you would like to communicate, you're more than welcome. I always look forward to receiving feedback myself. Now, a little bit about me. If you guys had read my bio, you might have realized that I grew up in Africa. So I grew up close to the Botswana border. There's a city called Gaborone. It's about 60 kilometers from there, in a very rural, very arid area that I grew up. And my first experience in helping people was when I helped my mother to set up an adult education center to teach adults literacy. And from then I was sort of hooked. My mum and dad were teachers, and then became farmers, and my grandfather was a professor, and my grandmother was a teacher. So I sort of rolled into it and became part of what I do today. My sister today is a teacher as well, and but I like adult education. I like working with adults and see how we can help each other. So a little bit about what I do. Now, I'm a problem solver. One of the things I get a kick off out of is finding solutions to problems. I believe hope is very important, so I like giving people hope, and not just them hope. I like to also cling to hope and find the hope. And I think if you're in a creative and innovative environment, understanding that tomorrow can be better than today is a very powerful tool. Then I'm a relationship builder, someone that believes that people are the most important asset a company has, and also the most important asset you have as a person. And then I believe in expressing appreciation. It's always important to show gratitude and show people that you appreciate what they do. And then the last thing is I'm very curious. So I have a very broad scope in which I read about things, discover things, research things. So sometimes I know a little bit about everything, not a whole lot about a lot deeper stuff. But if you have any questions at any time, if you have any curiosity you want to express on anything that's related to this, you're more than welcome to do so during the sessions, or even after the sessions, you're more than welcome to contact me. All right. So over the last few years, I've been looking at how do certain things link together, and specifically, what kind of characteristics do we have as people and what makes us unique? Now, you guys might have heard of a guy called Simon Sinek, and Simon has this why, how, what that he takes approach on. So why does a company do what it does, and how does it do it, and what does it do then, and so on. I like to use this as well when it comes to people and to myself. So why do I do things? So what motivates me, what drives me? I call them superpowers because I believe once you've discovered them, you can really get cracking and make a huge difference, not just in your own life, but also those around you. The how is what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is the feedback. So how do I receive feedback, and how do I use that feedback to grow? And in the what is the behavior? It's an outcome. It is something that we all can change if we would like to, and behavior is easier to change than motivators. For instance, in the last 3 years, my motivators haven't changed much, but I've quit smoking. So these things are possible, right? So let's look at a little bit of why and the how and the what. We've talked about motivators, feedback, and behavior, but what does that mean? That means that why, or those things that motivate us, are in essence the fuel that drives our everyday behavior. Now, I've got a surprise for you. It's infinite. The motivation that motivates you is an infinite source of energy. If we understand feedback and we know what we get as input from others that help us to improve what we do every day, we're basically adding the oxygen. And the behavior is a little flame that results from that. So if we want to make our little light shine brighter, we need to add more oxygen, which means feedback is a wonderful tool to help us to do so. And in a mentoring relationship, feedback is at the core. So I just see something strange there. Okay, that's still coming good. All right. So I just need to make sure that I'm not missing a slide there. Okay, then something called mirror neurons. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about this before, but it basically helps babies, for instance, to recognize who their mother is. So one of the things that you'll see with babies, they start smiling, and when they smile, we smile, and when we smile, they smile. And as mothers, I'm sure some of you might have already seen that happen as well. But those mirror neurons become a problem later in life, especially if we work in multicultural environments, because we grow up recognizing people that look like us and eventually act like us. So that means for me as a man, it's easier to recognize something in another man, and for women the same way, and for people of color the same way as well. However, this bias that we grow into does not give us any excuses. It's not an excuse, it's a way just to understand that these things happen. But what also happens is that we can influence the way that we look at our environment. Now, I've got a few questions here. So let's see, I don't know where we get the chat to the front.
Let me see.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So roughly about 50% of who we are is determined by genetics or epigenetics. Now, to give you guys a quick explanation between those two, genetics is basically your genes, how it's made up, and those express certain characteristics. Epigenetics is a way to switch on certain genes or switch them off, mainly switch them on. So, for instance, the latest research shows that for gay boys especially, epigenetics plays a role. And that means during time in the womb, external environmental influences that can influence the mother will eventually influence the genetic makeup by either switching on or switching off, what's commonly referred to as a gay gene. which is a very interesting thing if we look at epigenetics. So when do we switch things on and when do we switch them off, and what's the ethics behind that? But that's not what we're here for tonight. So let's just say roughly 50% of who you are is determined at birth or very early on in your life, and it's only the other 50% that is going to be shaped by your environment and by yourself. Now the question is, how much is influenced by our environment? Now, if you can express that in a percentage, just put in the percentage there in the chat and we can see what the sort of consensus is on that. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. I think we're everybody now, close to. So that means that if 50% is determined early on, and the percentage you've just given me, right, is the other makeup, the other 50%, that means that between our environment and our genes, we're basically saying 100% is covered. Or if you say 20%, that leaves another 30% that you can influence yourself. Now, if we look at the research, however, it's more like this. So it's 50% genes or genetic tendencies to the right, and then on the left you'll see there's the intentional activities, and at the bottom is circumstances or environment. It's only 10% of who you eventually become is influenced by your environment. 40% are those active choices you make to make a difference to your life. So your reaction to your environment is more important than your environment's influence itself. So that also means there's hope. No matter how difficult any situation is that we are in, we can make a difference by making choices and actively choosing to take action. Right. So when we look at our environment or at the people around us, and we say, what's the impact of what we feel? So for instance, how do I react to my environment or to something you say, for instance? What would be the difference between the people that are very little affected or not affected by it at all and people that are very much affected by it? Pick one of those percentages and put it in the chat for us, and then we'll see what your views are on this. Okay, tens, hundreds, 50s. So it could be 100% difference. 100% difference would mean between me and you, it's almost like a doubling of the difference. So, strangely enough, research has shown us something different. Now let's quickly have a look at this. My emotional state, how happy I am. So let's say happier will be on the top left axis, on the left axis, where the more it goes to the top, the happier I am, and the more it goes to the bottom, the less happy I am. And to the right is time. So it's something called sustain and recovery. And then the next one we have there is swing. So when we go up in mood, the swing is positive. When we go down, it's negative. Now, how long we can hold on to something positive is called sustain, and how long it takes for us to recover from something negative is called recovery. Right. So when it comes to these things, you'll see there's an average line in the middle, but there's a top line and a bottom line as well, also known as your happiness bandwidth. Now, for some people, that bandwidth as a whole is lower than for other people, and that's what we're talking about. How far do we differ? Okay, and in our perceptions, do we differ? Now, somebody like Winston Churchill, which took a whole country through a war, was a depressive. He was actually suffered from depression his whole life. And then what I normally refer to as the Californian surfer dude is at the top, which goes running into the surf and go like, wee, and that's it, you know. Two different extremes. And what are those extremes? Those extremes differ by 3,000%. So that also means when we're looking at a mentoring relationship, the difference in the way that the mentor and the mentee may experience something could be as much as 3,000%. So if I tell you something and you react really heavily to it, I should not be surprised because we're different. That's also what makes us unique. But those differences can sometimes come back to bite us. So understanding this and being sensitive to the fact that people might experience things differently then means we need some or another framework or some or another tool to help us structure this communication so that the person that might most negatively be impacted by the relationship, which usually the mentee, can have a way to pipe up or speak up and explain how they feel and how much they appreciate or don't appreciate certain comments or information. Now, this is my little growth formula. I'm not going to take you through the whole thing. It's part of a master's thesis. If you guys ever want to read that, let me know. I'll make it available. But the basic premise is that there's something called flow. Now, flow is what I call ultimate engagement. It's devised by a guy called Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Not important right now. You can read more on the website if you want. But he basically said that as a manager, we can help people to take their skills because we know how skilled they are and we know the difficulty of the task. And we can decide how those two things combine to get the person to perform optimally. What Mihaly also says is the prerequisite for this is that we need to have high passion or we need to engage with intrinsic motivation. And the intrinsic motivation basically then pushes flow. Now, if we look at the way that people work in general, we look at skills and knowledge, and we acquire knowledge at a certain rate, and then we're going to practice that knowledge and turn it into a skill. And the amount of effort we put into that actually makes this whole formula run exponentially because that is a multiplication by the effort there. So the more effort we put into something, the more skilled we become at it, or the more knowledge we gain. The more effort we put into it, the faster we gain skills and the faster we gain knowledge. So when we look at this motivation as a driver, we realize that motivation is actually the primary influencer of how much effort we put into anything, and thus also becomes the driver of exponential growth. So what does that mean? Understanding what drives us, what helps us become or motivates us is important. So for mentees and mentors both, it's important to understand what drives the other person, because that helps you to frame those things that need to be done, changed, or looked at in a way that motivates the person instead of demotivates the person. So, now you might have heard that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, unfortunately you can. So it doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, some of us, like myself, are a bit older. And I still remember the days when my dad told me, you know what, once you're in your middle 20s, you won't learn anything new anymore, and so forth. Now, we've disproven that completely. With new psychological, neurological tests, it's actually been shown that we can rewire large parts of the brain and learn new things. The brain does have a certain amount of maximum capacity, but we can work around it by learning new things and changing the pathways. So that's, for instance, why I managed to stop smoking. It's a different pathway. So I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but I'm a big fan of Einstein and some of these quotes. And he basically defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I think that's one of the most important things for mentees as well, is to realize that we need to change our behavior. And because we change our behavior, it changes the outcomes that we can have. So if we know that our motivation is always the same or stays similar, then our behavior is the thing that's going to drive our relationships and going to impact others. And that's the one thing we can change, which will then also change the interaction within those relationships. Okay. He also said a person that never made a mistake is also someone that never tried anything new. So I would like to challenge you guys to do something new, try something different, and see what the impact is in our environment. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of Peter Drucker. I was actually looking for some nice female quotes, and I only found these two guys that I normally work with. So if you guys have any amazing women out there that have some amazing quotes, please send it to me. I'm a bit of a quote fanatic, so I love looking at those. So one of the things that Peter says is that people tend to not know what they're good at. They think they know what they're good at. And then sometimes they know what they're not good at, and even then they're wrong. So don't assume you know a lot about yourself, and then it allows you to grow, and it allows you to discover something new. So just a quick run through mentoring versus coaching. So what's the main difference? So if you look at mentoring, it's relationship oriented. So it's basically long term. It's not something we're going to do over the next month or two. It's something 6 months, year, or even longer. So because we're building a relationship, that it also means we need to build trust. And part of that trust building means we need to understand each other better. So very often with mentoring, the first few months is more getting to know each other and getting to understand each other. And at the same time, allowing the mentee to figure out what they need help with and how they need that help delivered. So mentoring in general is also mutually beneficial. A coach tends to be retained to help people with certain skills or acquire certain skills or work on certain specific elements, whereas a mentor tends to be there for life. I have certain mentors of mine I've been in contact with for the last 20 years. All wonderful people, and I think you guys will also discover some wonderful people that you might be working with in this organization as well. Something that is important to realize is there is a design phase in the beginning. So that also means that as mentor and mentee, you need to sit down and talk to each other and understand what the mentee needs. And as a mentor, you will get quite a lot out of it by helping the mentee figure it out. Okay. Mentoring also tends to focus around things like career and personal development. And also remember, mentees, you need the support and guidance of the mentor, but you set the agenda. So you need to decide what you need to learn from this. Okay. So when it comes to feedback, now as a mentor, you will be giving a lot of feedback to mentees, and mentees will be receiving a lot of feedback, and sometimes vice versa. However, with feedback, the one thing that happens is we all are resistant to it. Now, there are certain things that influence that resistance, and we're going to look at 3 different things, and those 3 things we'll delve into more deeply tonight into one element, and then in the next sessions we'll dive into the rest. Okay. So the 3 triggers that tend to stop us dead in our tracks is, one of them is truth. So the first reaction on the truth is, you're lying to me. No, that can't be true. I don't believe you. That's false. The moment you hear those reactions in your mind, you basically experience a truth trigger, or a trigger that says, I'm not allowed to believe this because it's touching me or affecting me in a certain way, or it touches on beliefs that I might have. The next one is relationships triggers. Now, relationship triggers usually start in your mind with things like, who do you think you are? Who are you to tell me this? You're not my mother. You know, those kind of things pop into your mind. You know there's a relationship trigger that's happened. And the other one is identity. That goes into things like, oh yes, I'm always like that, or I'm never like that. So when you hear things like always, never, and so on in your mind, you know you've been hit with an identity trigger. So usually truth triggers are around content and tends to be evaluative in nature. Relationship has to do with the interaction or the interplay between 2 people. And sometimes there's other things that creep in. Now, since we're talking about relationships here with mentors and mentees, we also need to understand that relationship triggers can be something that can be built positively, or they can have a negative reaction on us as well. Now, I will be providing some books and references and links over the next few months, and also some exercises and themes for you guys to practice with and play with. But there's one book, it's by a woman called Smith, husband is a lecturer at Harvard, and she did her life's work on relationships at work. So if you're struggling with relationships at work, I would recommend looking at her book. It helps you to understand how you could change those relationships, even if it's only you that makes the changes. Okay. So identity usually has to do with who I am and how that impacts. So truth triggers, as I said before, this doesn't apply to me. I don't believe it. Relationship, who do you think you are to tell me this? And there's another one for identity. I'm not like that, am I? All right. So tonight we're going to look at truth triggers. So the first thing is we need to understand the three different types of feedback. So there's something called appreciation, and appreciation starts with thank you, and it ends with, oh my God, that was awesome. And remember, there's a grading in between. So if you're going to talk to somebody, please ensure that there's always a little bit of appreciation put in there. Right. The other one is coaching. Now, coaching conversation or feedback means that the end of the end goal of that coaching is I want to help you. Right. So appreciation is thank you. Coaching is I want to help you. The third one is evaluation. Now, evaluation means we're going to compare it to something. So we're going to say, well, we've looked at things before, we've set a baseline, and now we're comparing to that baseline, and you're either on the baseline, below the baseline, or above the baseline. You guys know these kind of evaluation meetings you have once every 6 months, once a year, once a quarter with your manager, and then they tell you these are the things that you've done well on or not well on. And sometimes they have not set those criteria with you beforehand, and then it comes as a surprise. Or they've changed the criteria in the meantime, and you're looking for a surprise again. So one of the things to remember is evaluation as a prerequisite. It means the criteria has to have been set beforehand and have had to be agreed on. You cannot expect me to perform to a certain criterion if I don't know what it is. All right. So, appreciation, here's the golden rule, 5 to 1. So you 5 times tell somebody, this is good, this is good, this is good, thank you, and then you're allowed to say something that the person needs to focus on and change. This is the way the human mind works. There were studies done, and it came out to 2.9, between 2.9 and 11. So 5 to me is sort of like golden median. And it basically means that below 3, it means it becomes negative, and the perception is that you're always only complaining. And if it goes above 11, it's like everything is always good and there's nothing I can do wrong. And that goes in the wrong direction. So if you have a 5 to 1 ratio, I know 5 is high, especially in the Netherlands, but try it. It makes a huge difference in people's lives. All right. Okay. So we need all three. We need evaluation, coaching, and appreciation. Evaluation allows us to see if we have grown and if things have changed. So, for example, one of the teams I recently worked with, there was a lot of negativity in the team, and the team tended to bite each other in the back a lot. So we need to find a way for them to start look at the perception of their lives and see how negative or positive that is. So we did a test to see how positive or negative they were. And then from that, we started doing some exercises. One of them is a gratitude exercise. So at the end of every day, all you do is you take a diary, and you take 5 minutes and you just write down what you are thankful for today. And we did that with them, and after 22 days, we were able to compare that with the scores beforehand, and they all changed. So they all started experiencing life more positively. So the moment you focus on positive things, you tend to start behaving positively and perceiving things positively. But that's where evaluation, for instance, is good, to compare things from before and now and see that things have improved. Coaching is important because when we help others, it also helps us. Now, something I'm not going to go into tonight a lot, but there's something called oxytocin. It's a brain chemical. And that brain chemical is what helps us feel connected. Now, when you do something nice for someone else, that brain chemical is released in your brain, as well as the person for whom you're doing the nice thing. But strangely enough, it's also released in the brain of everybody that observe it. So doing something nice for someone else is always a good thing. So in coaching, helping someone also means you're trying to do something nice for someone. Now, evaluation and coaching can sometimes be confused with each other. But the one thing we need to remember is that appreciation, evaluation, and coaching can never be done in the same sentence. Pick one. Be brave. Just pick one. Am I going to express appreciation? Am I going to express evaluation or coaching? Because it becomes easier for the person receiving the feedback to understand what you're talking about. Saying something like, I think this is great, but, right, already means you're putting two things in the same sentence. Try and steer away from things like however and but and those kind of connectors. So when we look at engagement, now we talked about flow earlier and how much engagement there is in what the ultimate engagement is. But when we look at engagement across various continents, I've only picked up 3 here. This is from a Gallup report. We see that 31% of employees in the US feel actively engaged, 10% in Western Europe, and 14% in Australia and New Zealand. In the Netherlands, 9% of employees feel actively engaged, 11% feel actively disengaged, and about 80%, is neither here nor there. Now, can you imagine what the difference would be if we can get people to increase their level of engagement? So it's not just your own engagement, but also those around you. Now, in the Gallup report, basically coaching and appreciation is core to it. So after 12 questions, 4 questions has to do with coaching and engagement, of the engagement with coaching and appreciation. So those are really key factors in helping people grow or engaging. That also means as a mentor and a mentee, to ensure that you engage well with each other, you need to understand that we need to stick to the different types of feedback. Okay. So then there's something called cross-transactions. I need you guys' help here. Please think back on the last week when you started talking to a manager or a work colleague, and they started talking back to you, and it felt like they were answering a completely different question from the one that you were asking. Or that you answered something thinking that it was the right answer, but then you realized that they were actually asking something completely different. Did you guys experience that, let's say for instance in the last week? Just put a number in there, once or twice or more, and let's see what the chat says. If I mention stuff like work and you're currently between jobs or something similar, think about your personal life as well. These principles work in personal life as well as work life.
Many of them are in the full-time program.
Many of the full-time program. Okay, cool. Think of if you're in the full-time program, think on, for instance, the teams that you work in when you're doing your assignments. I remember when I was doing my MBA at RSM, I had one guy for my team, and for about a whole semester, we talked about different things. It was really frustrating. All right, so it seems like all of us have a sort of idea that these things are quite frequent, and that's important to realize that sometimes we do talk about things that that others don't understand, and there needs to be a way in which we can communicate that. So how do we make this work better? We make sure that we have a clear purpose. So when you want to give feedback, or when you want to ask for feedback, make sure you understand the purpose of the conversation. So start with the type of feedback. Is it appreciation? Is it coaching? Is it? What was the last one? Ladies here?
Evaluation.
Evaluation, yes. So it's either evaluation, coaching, or appreciation. Fix your purpose in your mind beforehand. Decide what you want to talk about, why you want to talk about it, and what you want the outcomes to be. And then make sure that you separate the evaluation, appreciation, coaching in the conversation. It's better to pick one or two things to talk about than have 5 and none of them come to fruition. It's always better to have one focused idea that actually does make a difference. All right. So there are other truth triggers. I haven't put all the different variations in truth triggers here, but there's something called wrong spotting. So the moment that somebody says, I believe the sky is blue today, then go like, no, it's turquoise. All right? Trying to find what's wrong with things constantly. Be careful of this. Then labeling things. You are at the expletive of your choice. Disparate goals. So for instance, I might be aiming at a specific goal. Let's suppose it's an MBA team. And one person might want to get a distinction and the other person just wants to pass. One person considers the networking more important, the other one the academics. So are the goals the same? Other thing is root assumptions. We'll talk a little bit in the next webinar about something called the ladder of inference, and then we'll look a bit more into that there. But the root assumption is usually I assume something about you or you about me, and from that, that's where our reasoning starts from. And if that assumption at the base is wrong, then all our conclusions are going to be wrong. Okay. And then we tend to get causes and outcomes confused. Behavior, for instance, is an outcome. Motivation sits on the side of the causes. Right? And then we all have blind spots. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of something called the Johari window. But if you don't know the Johari window, Google it, download it. It's a little PDF. Most places you can download a little PDF, do the questionnaires in there, and just score it for yourself. And gives you an idea of how open you are to other people's feedback and how much you share with other people. So sharing it with other people, we share a little bit more. That means they get to know more about us, which helps us to build trust. And asking them for more input about us allows them to create the same for us, i.e. to help us learn about ourselves. And in learning about ourselves, we can grow. So, any questions?
You can open the...
Unmute, yeah.
Where do I click to unmute?
We can take the presentation away.
I'm still going to talk about this next 2 slides.
Okay, but
I first want to listen to some questions and then we
can come back.
Yes.
And we can I will unmute all of you. So if there is terrible racket in your house, know that the racket is going to be heard here. So watch out. I want to unmute you guys.
So if there's noise in your house, just mute your own one for yourself.
I think you have to put the name of your now document at the end. There are 2 questions about this. You can put in the chat so everyone.
At the end of the slides,
okay,
my email address and my website address is there.
Yeah.
And you guys can contact me.
No, I mean, but the window you mentioned.
Johari window.
Yeah,
I see somebody's already put a link up there. I can also share one via my Dropbox or something similar. Will you just make a note of it?
Okay.
Right now,
just
questions.
for practical purposes, on the top right of your screen, you must raise your hand if you need to. Can you see it? Well, otherwise you can put your question in the chat so that it's easier to communicate.
There are two men, they can ask as well.
Oh,
Sir Marcel and Frank.
Welcome.
And welcome to the boys as well. Yeah. No questions?
I have a question. I think we discussed
Sure.
this question before when we did the test of the presentation. Because sometimes some leaders, or we can say managers, leaders, when they are providing feedback or when they are explaining things, and they say, super good, wonderful, wonderful. Sometimes it's super fake.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like they are following some kind of rules or book or something, but really they are not feeling it. They are, and then in the other side, and you think, what the heck? I mean, they are not matching with the situation. It's not matching the sentence with them. It's not matching with nothing. And then you have the wrong perception. So how to deal with this situation when you spot someone is following a book or some rules, but really they are not meaning.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, some people are just doing their feedback as if from a book, so but they don't really mean what they say.
Yeah.
The first question I would ask is, what about this is important to you? Mm-hmm. What is the impact that it has on you? Look at that and then decide from that how you can best approach the conversation. We will talk about in session 3 and 4, we'll talk more about how you engage and how do you set boundaries, and also when you decide not to take feedback. You can sometimes just say things like, you know what, I really appreciate the feedback, but it's not something I can do anything with in its current form. So let me think about this and I'll get back to you. And if they keep on pushing the same feedback on you without thinking, you can address it and just say, I would like to appreciate your feedback more, but it seems like it's not genuine, authentic. Mm-hmm. Can we have a discussion about that? And remember, you're putting them on the spot. You're giving them something that they might not have known from before. So it's also feedback to them, and they might not be ready for it at that point. So you can also say, can we set up a meeting? I would like to talk to a way in which we give each other feedback and find a way that works for both of us better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a question here is how to best isolate appreciation and evaluation in the same feedback session with a mentor, I assume. So it doesn't really matter if it's a mentor or anybody else. Let's look at a personal relationship, for instance. I think it makes it a little bit closer to home, makes sense to make it easier. Your mum tells you in the same sentence that she really appreciates the fact that you're studying and you're doing well at your degree, but you're still not doing as well as your sister. All right? So there she's expressed appreciation, and the next moment, evaluation. And those two don't fit in the same sentence, because she has not given you any criteria about what is your sister doing better, in what way is she doing it better, and why does she consider it better in the first place. Right? So what are the baseline criteria? So when you want to separate them, start with appreciation and then focus on one specific thing that you want to evaluate. But I would suggest rather focus on coaching than evaluation in a mentorship relationship, because evaluation tends to be something that we agreed beforehand, and then it needs to, at one point, be compared to that. So, for instance, if you made an agreement with your mentor to work on certain things, you would give them feedback about how far you've progressed along that track, and they may evaluate that it's a good or a bad, or good, or either a good progress or progress that needs to move faster. And if it needs to move faster, for instance, they may have some suggestions as to how to do that. Right. Let me scroll a little bit back because it's a long question here. Just need to make sure I can read it all. Okay, there we go. Okay. The question is basically, do we give a feedback sandwich, i.e. positives and negatives, or not at all? We have to be very careful here when we're talking about negatives. The goal is more important. Is it coaching or is it evaluation? And we tend to, whenever we look at the negatives, we tend to confuse evaluation and coaching with each other. They are relatively close. But make sure that you understand that evaluation has to do with the previous set of things that were agreed. So if an idea is to coach someone, to help someone, then you can express appreciation. Let me give you an example, then you'll understand more what I mean. Let's say you're a consultant, and as a consultant you create a report, and for the first time that you do this kind of report, and you go to your manager or to a senior consultant, and you say, well, here is the report. Now, the senior can react in many different ways. They can say, oh, thank you, which means they grab it, they chuck it in the tray and go like, yeah, okay, anything else? All right. That is also giving feedback because they have not expressed any appreciation whatsoever. If, however, they take the time and say, you know what, I would love to read this. Can we set up a time to discuss it? And that in that discussion, they say, well, you know what, Chapter A, first chapter, there's one or two things I would like to show to you, but I also want to show to you chapter paragraph 1, 3, 5, and 7. Really good, well done. That is precisely what I needed there. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 need some work. Then it's easy to structure 5 things or 3 to 5 things that is positive, and that you can say thank you for, and you say that is good enough. Because saying something is good enough is already a way of steering things, because you're then expressing to the person that next time you give me something similar, I will appreciate the same way. If you don't do that, you only hear the negatives. And that's one thing that I've noticed happens a lot in the Netherlands, and there's a lot of negatives. It's always like, this is not good enough, that's not good enough, that's not good enough. We never get around to saying please and thank you. And in the more in the rural areas in the Netherlands, my experience has been different, and up in Groningen it's been different as well. The people tend to still say thank you. In some other areas of the world, it goes completely out of whack the other way, and everything is fantastic and brilliant, and you still get fired. You know, and that's why we're trying to find a way to get a framework that can help us to work with this. And there's a book actually associated with this. So, and the last slide for this webinar will also have the name of the book. If you're Dutch speaking, the book is available in Dutch as well. It's called Feedback is een cadeautje. And in English, it's Thanks for the Feedback, the Art of and Science of Receiving Feedback Well. It's by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. But I'll give you guys a picture at the end, and you can have a look at that. Does that answer the question about the sandwich? Okay, perfect. Right.
May I ask you one as well?
Sure.
I was doing the pairing this morning, and I see that quite some people have similar challenges, and so there will be a lot of coaching, because there is a lot of empowering. That's what MentorWE. We empower ourselves. So, so the part of that you were talking about that will be more relevant for us will be the part of coaching, of helping. I know that you know a lot of it and you have lots of prepared, but give us a little bit that they can use so that they can get started on how to help, how to coach.
Each other.
Okay.
Yeah, each other. That's right. Equals these circumstances.
Okay. If you're facing the same challenges, so let's try and make it practical.
Do I give you examples?
Yeah, I can give you examples.
I just started them I just started the MBA, and I'm overwhelmed by, oh my God, I moved to the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands everything is different. So I have the cultural shock. I am missing people at home, and I have so much work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, I just finished the MBA, and I'm going to get out there, and I don't know what career I want, and I don't know if I want to stay in Europe, or if I can stay in Europe, if I want to go back to my country. Or the third one is I'm already in my career, and I am dealing with a company that is going wrong, and trying to navigate the company. These are more or less the three challenges that the whole group has.
Okay. Maybe it helps if I tell you a story.
Yeah.
As you guys may or may not know, is I fell out of the closet when I was 26, and I went through quite a lot of discrimination from that point onwards. I lost jobs, I lost family. I only reconnected with my parents last year after 21 years. And so there were times in my life when things felt like they were just too much, or everything was against me. And what I found is in those times that the relationships is what get me through it. So it's not necessarily do A or do B. It's more a case of I need someone to talk to. I need someone that understands my situation. And I think that's one of the most important things that mentors in my life have given me. The ability to just listen sometimes and allow me to talk, because very often I find my own solutions. But I need that support. I need to feel like I'm appreciated. We will talk about a lot more other things, and there's something called the superpower test that you can do on the website as well. That'll help you to figure out a few things for yourself. So things like what are the things that you find most important in life? What are your motivators? Those things can help you to make decisions about where do I go with my career. For instance, when I did the questionnaire myself the first time, it really shocked me to realize, it wasn't really a shock, but it was like I for the first time had a concrete proof of what I believed. And I could go to my manager and say, this job is not for me. I need to move. This is killing me. Emotionally, it's killing me. And I could explain it, because in our minds, we have a part of our brain that has the language center. And the language center and the emotional center have no direct connections. So when we try and express something that we feel, it's really difficult. And I found that when I did that survey, it allowed me to structure it in such a way that I could communicate it. And sometimes it's just that, finding ways of structuring how you feel about things so that you can communicate it, can then help you to move forward. Right. And if there's any specific questions, or people have anything specific that they're battling with, I love helping people. It's my thing, you know. So if you have any questions, you can always email me. We can set up a Skype call, and I can see if I can give you some help. Right. I might not have 4 hours consecutively to do that in, but I'm sure I can always fit in a bit of time to help anybody. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very curious, the relationships. Because being expats, I mean, like, I'm here in the Netherlands, but before I was in Germany and France, and you, like as well, you are now in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you are in, is when you have your group of friends. So you have always your family far away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you move countries, you left friends behind. So now we have WhatsApp and we have Skype, and we can. But it's really the question if we find out our friends, our circle of friends, and we can call them family. Some kind of. I think it's when we are in the country.
Yes, but I mean, you've also come. It's been your second country. Germany was first, and
no, it was. I come from Spain.
Yeah.
Before France, then Germany.
Oh, okay. So this is your third country already. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've learned this the hard way. Yeah. Now I found the same way. I found that when I came to the Netherlands, the first 2 months I was confronted with, should I make the choice of meeting a lot of other South Africans? And within weeks, I made the choice not to. Because the people that were here were not the people I would have normally made friends with back in South Africa. So I wanted to make clear choices that I wanted to have the same people to be friends, people that have a heart, people that have compassion, people that I like to associate with, irrespective of their cultural background or language. And that's why I chose to meet a lot of Dutch people. And in the process, I met quite a lot of foreigners. So my circle of friends about 50-50. But I agree with you, yes. Having some way of finding somebody here you can talk to, and I think MentorWE is a great organization for that, is finding somebody to talk about work is also not that easy. And when you have a mentor that you can talk to, somebody that you can unburden with, and share your deepest fears about work, for instance, with, and that can just listen and sometimes help you to find different ways of looking at it. I mean, eventually all of us make our own choices, make our own decisions, but it's great if there's somebody that can help us brainstorm and think about possible solutions so that we can have more choices available to us. Okay. All right, the questionnaire, just a slight warning on it. It's 120 questions. It is part of an international body of research. More than 5 million people have already done it, so it's research-backed and validated. I will send a link. I think that's the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, you can go to the website. I'll just put in the website address here.
Yeah, we will do a meeting minutes. And we can add all the books and all the links.
Yeah, it's on the PowerPoint presentation as well. If you go to the website called Exponentially.me, there's a section there called Assessments, and under Assessment, you just say Superpower Test, and you can do it there. The questionnaire is also available in multiple languages, so you don't have to do it just in English. You can do it in a language that's more familiar for you. I just asked my mum to do it, and we actually found one in Afrikaans. So. I wrote an article about my relationship with my mum this past week. They've just gone onto the website as well, and it was interesting to see that my mum and I actually have something in common. We all find relationships important. So, all right. Any more questions? Not? Okay. Let me just quickly switch back to the slides.
Yeah.
There, and then that one. Okay. There are a few other things as well. This is called the Visa Survey. I'm busy building this into the website as well. But this is something that is used by Christo Nel from South Africa. He teaches at the RSM one of the electives. He also teaches at Nyenrode and University of Cape Town. This is a specific one that has to do with leadership and overlaps in leaderships. It's interesting, I think, also for mentors and mentees, if you want to. I can ask Chris for permission, and I can just send you the Excel sheet, and you can just fill in the stuff there, because that's the shortest way of doing it. We'll also be busy building the software. And it's Christo's life's work, but it basically just ranks things on 4 axes, and in the Excel sheet there's an explanation as well. It helps you, when you don't need to work with someone, it helps you to just see what are the differences and what are the similarities in broad strokes, to help you connect much faster with each other. And then the other one, this is the survey that we've just been talking about, the superpowers one. It's about 24 character traits that people have and have in common with each other or not. This is one for myself and one of my workmates, and we have a lot of things in common with each other. This is unusual to have so much in common. But we get along very well as well, and I think that might explain things. But this is also another way of comparing things that you find important and that your mentor find important. Okay, and if you guys are interested in doing this as a pairing, let me know. Once you filled in the surveys online, just let me know the pairing and the email address you used online, and then I'll create a chart for you like this. Right. At the moment, I'm creating them manually, because my developer is still busy making it into something that'll be automatic. These are the books. So it's the same book. The one is just the Dutch one and the other one is the English one. I don't know how many other languages it's been translated into. I can check if you want to, but I think most people should be able to handle the Dutch or the English. My email address is the bottom left. It's Eksteen@exponentially.me, and the website I already gave you, that is www.exponentially.me. And I will be publishing themes and things to discuss there as well. And I'll let Yara know the moment things are ready for you guys to start looking at that. It'll probably be early next week. And then there'll be a theme every week for about a 6-week period to help you guys work through certain things for yourselves. All right. And that's it from me.
Thank you.
I think you guys got something out of it.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and thank you very much, Eksteen, for organizing this with so much detail and so much love. I can see the love for it. As I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, but I did not record it, that this morning I've went through the people who have replied the survey so far, and I was able to make all the pairs of the people who replied it. And we will be sending the results tomorrow. You all have a pair. And now that you have been empowered by Eksteen with how you can provide help to each other, you have to set your first appointment with your mentor-mentee, with your partner, and you have to just start. It doesn't matter, you don't need to be an expert. Just set time for coffee, set time for tea, and just start talking, just as humans. I studied coaching, and in that study they gave us one book that I will never forget. It's called The Skill Helper, and the first quote I read there was, "Help helps." You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to know everything. If you have the love, the compassion to help the other, to listen, you will be able to help. So set your appointment. As soon as you get our email tomorrow, make the appointment. So thank you very much. Do you have something to add, Ja?
No, I think it was a super great pleasure to organize this webinar with Blanca and Madeleine. And I hope we can do more and more webinars every month this year, and as well offline physical workshops. And we are planning as well a breakfast in the Women's Day, 8th of March in Rotterdam. So I think we are super excited. We are not only blogging in our new digital platform, MentorWE, but as well we are applying hardcore things to empower women and men if they want as well. So thank you very much. We enjoy as much, I think, you. We hope you will love our coaches and mentors helping you every day.
Thank you, and goodbye. A nice evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.